Why don't legendary cards feel legendary anymore? A major complaint people talk about nowadays is how legendary cards lost their flair. With legendary cards being easier to get nowadays than ever before, it has as a result made people upset about the cards losing their special charm. If you're a long-term player, you've probably noticed this yourself. You might have remembered opening a chest back in 2016 and getting your first few legendaries, jumping for joy because of how awesome it felt. Nowadays though, it seems like people are more annoyed by the animation of when you get a legendary over the joy of getting the legendary itself. But why is this? This rarity was initially intended to be a very hard to obtain rarity card that was a big deal to obtain. So what changed? In today's video, I will be discussing how over Clash Royale's lifespan, legendaries went from being truly legendary to being seen as a customary occurrence to many Clash Royale players. So first, let's talk about the history of the legendary card rarity. The legendary rarity wasn't always in the game. The rarity wasn't added until just before global launch on February 29th, 2016. Legendaries at this time were vastly different than legendaries today though. Legendaries were meant to be cards that had unique interactions and were not replaceable with other cards in the game. There were also only two legendary cards at first, being Princess and Ice Wizard. These cards had very unique abilities that truly made them feel like they deserved to be in its own status. Legendaries also only went up to level 6. Now, legendaries do have 6 levels today, but what made this aspect so special back then is at the time, epics could only scale up to a level 5 legendary, and common cards could only scale up to a level 4 legendary since they only went up to level 12. It's a bit hard to explain this properly because of how different the level scaling was at the time. Anyways, you needed 50 legendaries instead of 20 just to get your legendary to the final level, so you had to spend a lot of money to get it maxed. And doing this would allow your cards to come out on top on core interactions. The best example is a maxed Princess at the time not dying to maxed arrows. These cards not scaling properly made them feel legendary and unique to other card rarities. Also remember, there was no Pass Royale or Book of Books at the time to magically earn your 50 princesses with one magic item. You had to earn them one by one. So, how hard was it to obtain legendaries at this time? Today, there are a lot of ways to obtain legendaries that were not in the game in 2016. A lot of popular chests that exist in the game today were non-existent in early 2016. Your real only chance was to get them from a super magical chest, but they only appeared in a player's chest cycle once in every 500 chests, which meant it would take the average player months of playing just to obtain one. Otherwise, you'd have to fork over 4,600 gems in the shop, which is about $40. But the chances of getting a legendary from this amazing chest wasn't even 100%. In fact, statistically, you wouldn't get one. But how rare exactly was it? Well, there's actually a number of factors that determine this. This includes how many cards were in the chest, which changes over time with new arenas being added, how many legendaries were in the game, and how many commons were in the game. Each chest also had a legendary factor number. The formula on the screen determines how rare a legendary would be by filling in the data. It obviously increased a lot over time with new arenas and more legendaries being added, but let's calculate how hard it was to get legendaries at global launch. Global launch had just 2 legendaries and 7 arenas. This meant a super magical chest in the highest arena gave 522 cards. There were also 15 common cards in the game since the Royal Giant was added in the same update as the first legendaries. Super magical chests and magical chests actually had the same legendary factor, but since super magical chests contained more cards, the chances were still higher. If we plug the numbers into the formula, we get a total of 12.8%. This was the highest chance of getting a legendary from anywhere in the game. And instead of today, where you need 42 legendaries to max a card, you needed 86 per card in March of 2016. So how much money would you have to spend if you were to gem a legendary to max level? If you were to gem your way to a maxed legendary on March 2nd, 2016, let's say you bought $100 gem packs only since it has the best value. This means each dollar is worth 140 gems. With a cost of 4,600 gems, each super magical chest would cost you $32.86, with each chest having a 12.8% drop rate of a legendary. This means you'd have to spend an average of $256.70 for one legendary. To get 86 legendaries, you would have to spend approximately $22,075.89. And that's if you got the same legendary all 86 times. If you actually did this, you'd cycle between the Ice Wizard and the Princess, which means you wouldn't quite be able to max out either with just $22,000. Just remember that this is how it used to be the next time you see a legendary chest for 500 gems in the shop. Legendaries weren't just rare, but overpowered as well. Princess and Ice Wizard were arguably the best cards in the game. Since nobody could really level them up though, it didn't break the game in a way like other strong cards did. And since there was no tournament standard, there's no grand challenge stats for this time, so we may never truly know how good these cards were at an equal level at the time. Unless you were a big spender, the only real way to get legendaries was to get lucky from chests. Although super uncommon, if you opened hundreds of gold, silver, crown, and free chests, most players would be bound to get one eventually. This made it extremely exciting for players who could get their hands on one. After searching for a while, I did find some gameplay of level 6 legendaries in this era of the game when it was the hardest it had ever been to obtain them. You have to remember that even in this era, there were no quests, no clan chests, no clan wars, nothing. So now hopefully you have a better understanding of how special legendary cards were at this time. If you think the game is pay to win today, just remember how bad it truly was in 2016. Only the most greedy pay-to-win games would have a system like this in place, and in contrast to some people's opinions, Supercell is not the most greedy game developers. Their main goal is to make a good game that will get the most players, not what will make money in the short term. Usually. So over time, changes would be made. As I said before, more legendaries meant a higher chance of pulling legendaries from all chests, and by March 2016 to the end of 2016, the total number of legendaries would go from 2 to 9, whereas the number of commons only went from 15 to 18. The number of arenas also increased from 7 to 10. All these factors made the chances of getting legendaries from a super magical chest go from 12.8% to 57%, which made it a lot easier. On top of this, in May of 2016, level 6 legendaries would be removed. People that did have level 6 legendaries would get a huge gem refund. I don't know about you, but if I spent $22,000 upgrading my legendaries to max level, and then they removed max level, a gem refund would not satisfy me. But this is why I don't spend my salary on a free-to-play mobile game. This means through buying super magical chests, it would now cost $2,075 to max each legendary, which comes out to $18,676.69 for all 9, rather than $44,000 for 2. Grand challenges were also added in 2016, which would give a really great chest. A 12-win Grand Challenge chest at the end of 2016 would give you a 27.5% chance of getting a legendary. Although getting 12 wins was a challenge and the percentage was much lower than a super magical chest, it would only cost 100 gems to enter, which meant if you constantly got 12 wins, you would only be paying about 363 gems per legendary, whereas super magical chests, you were paying about 8,070 gems per legendary. This at least gave an avenue for very skilled players to get legendaries for less money. Of course, not everyone is a top 1,000 player or the son of Jeff Bezos, so another method was added in 2016, the legendary chest. This chest, like its name implied, guaranteed a player a legendary card. This chest would appear in the chest cycle very rarely, but also appeared in the shop for 500 gems, which to many players seems like a joke today, which it kind of is today, But back then, unless you were a prodigy player and had all the time in the world to grind grand challenge wins, this chest was a great investment to earn some legendaries. And finally, I should mention the clan chest, which came into Clash Royale at the very end of 2016, which gave a 14.48% chance of a legendary and was available every 2 weeks. By the end of 2016, legendaries were still difficult to obtain, but the process was easier, which players appreciated, at least to the extent players can appreciate things in this community. Now, there was one more thing that happened in 2016 that did greatly affect how easy it was to get legendaries. This is one of the major factors that made legendaries feel way less special in my opinion. Once you got to Legendary Arena, legendary cards would occasionally appear in the shop, which you could buy for 40,000 gold. What made this contribute largely to legendaries feeling less special was that it officially tied a gold value to legendaries. Legendaries had felt so rare, so infrequent, it almost felt like there wasn't even a gold value tied to them because of how special and rare they were, which of course factored into how they were seen by many players. There always was a gold value tied to legendaries, but this kind of made it official and apparent to many players. 40,000 gold was a ridiculous price that many players could not even begin to think about affording back then. Without gold crates, clan wars, or constant challenges, as well as chest rewards just overall being worse, it was nowhere near as affordable as it may seem today. I will also mention that the shop worked differently back then. You could actually buy up to 3 legendaries at once. You'd think it would cost 120,000 gold, but it would actually cost 240,000 gold because the shop prices would exponentially get higher when you bought more. Not exactly how most deals work, but I suppose more options is always better. This change also made legendaries available in a way that took away their surprise factor. Getting a legendary from just about any chest was unexpected and a bright surprise to many players, which made them feel lucky and special. But now here it was, sitting right in the shop for gold along its peasant rarity counterparts. By the end of 2016, they had certainly lost some of their value, although many players even by the end of the year joked about how they would never even unlock certain legendaries, so they were certainly rare enough to the point where many players still saw legendaries to a very high standard. But with Supercell's cursed generosity, legendaries would only lose more of their value coming in 2017. In 2017, 3 more legendaries would be added to Clash Royale, as well as the number of arenas going up to 12. And although the chances of getting a legendary from a super magical chest grew even further because of this, super magical chests were actually later removed. A new chest, the Legendary King's Chest, would replace the super magical chest from the shop. This chest only cost 2,500 gems instead of the super magical chest's 4,600 gems. And not only did it guarantee a legendary for almost half the price, but it let you choose between 2 different ones. The super magical chest was just too expensive for many players, and at this point the chances were too high, but not guaranteed to get a legendary from a super magical chest. So one was pretty much expected at this point, and would disappoint players if they didn't get one from a super magical chest. This chest didn't dissipate completely, as you could still get it from the chest cycle, but even that would be later phased out entirely with a similar chest that did guarantee a legendary. This made maxing a legendary purely from buying these chests now cost about $642.86, or $7,714.32 for all 12. Maxing out a legendary with just legendary chests would only cost $128.57, so it was still the best deal if you were gemming your way there. Although it should be noted that the legendary chest wasn't always available, so you couldn't mass open them. But there was certainly a lot more that came into 2017 that led to the devaluation of legendaries than this. 2 big features added to Clash Royale in 2017 were leagues and quests. Leagues would start when you reached 4,000 trophies, and you would get into a new league every few hundred trophies. At the end of the season, you would earn a now removed chest from Clash Royale, the draft chest. That would be better depending on how good you did in a season. The thing about this chest is if you made it to Master 2 League, which was 5,300 trophies at the time, you would actually be guaranteed a legendary from this draft chest. Since most players could hit 5,300 trophies, it was practically a scheduled legendary for most people, which again takes away from the surprise factor. The draft chest was a very fulfilling reward for pushing though, and actually in some higher leagues you had a chance of getting 2 legendaries. But since you could easily earn this every season, it made it overall much less special. Quests were also added to Clash Royale in 2017, which you could earn points towards Legendary, Legendary Kings, and Super Magical chests, again adding another route to earn legendaries. You would have to complete 25 days worth of quests to earn these, but it was just one of the many ways legendaries were devalued. And on top of this, special challenges were being added much more frequently, of which many gave legendaries as rewards. But the rarity of legendaries was not the only thing that contributed to a legendary card's devaluation. As I said before, in 2017, 3 legendaries were released, 4 if you counted Royal Ghost, but only if you beat the challenge early. The 3 added were Bandit, Night Witch, and Mega Knight. The thing with legendaries, as I discussed earlier, is that they were intended to be unique cards with special abilities not matched by any other card. One of these cards in 2017 broke that rule. Bandit's dashing ability was certainly unique, as well as the Mega Knight's jumping mechanic, but the Night Witch had no unique ability. The Night Witch could summon bat troops, but the Witch already had the summoning ability as an epic card. The cope argument at the time was,
when she dies, she will spawn 4 bats in a 2.5 tile radius. This is what makes her unique as a legendary card.
Some argued that the death bats were her unique ability. Even if so, this ability in general was pretty lame compared to the other legendary abilities. Like, her only unique ability happens when she dies? That was unlike any other legendary. Plus, cards like Golem spawned Golemites upon its death in a similar way, so death troops weren't really anything new. Not to mention that later, the Witch got her own death skeletons as an epic card, and the Night Witch lost her death bats, her so-called legendary ability. So that argument is pretty much gone today. And over time, some new legendaries were questioned into whether or not that ability was worth the legendary status, and new cards were also added in later years, which felt like they should have been legendaries, but were neglected to lower rarities. Also before this year, legendaries were exclusive in the shop in the Legendary Arena, but Legendary Arena moved up to 3,800 trophies, and Supercell didn't raise the trophy requirement for legendaries, which meant players not in Legendary Arena could still buy legendaries. By the end of 2017, legendary cards were really starting to blend in with the other rarities more and more. 2018 was no exception to the trend of devaluing legendary cards, adding another 3 total. But there was also one major update that devalued legendaries once again. Not Clan Wars, but trade tokens! You may be a little confused as to how trade tokens devalued legendaries. It's not like it could generate more, but just move existing ones. A player could hold 1 additional legendary at the time after maxing it out. However, this was soon removed, which meant now that anyone with a maxed legendary could infinitely trade legendaries away as long as they had the trade tokens to do it. Although it would cost you 20,000 gold to do, it was a really cheap and easy way to obtain legendaries that you didn't have. There was no fun or surprise factor in this. Trade tokens were reliable and easy to get from challenges, clan wars, and global tournaments. Rather than finding a thrill and surprise in finding a legendary, you could use trade tokens to buy legendaries from your clanmates at a cheap price, assuming you had at least 1 maxed already. Global tournaments also offered really good rewards, which would give you multiple free legendaries for just a few hundred gems if you got enough wins. So now you have a better idea of how devalued legendaries have gotten over the years. I will now briefly go through the last few things that devalued legendaries from 2019 up to the present. 2019 added the Season Pass, which pretty much devalued everything in the game, as you could get it for just $5 for a lot of items and perks. You got a ton of extra rewards, which is obviously going to include a lot of progress towards your legendaries. 2020 added Clan Wars 2, in which no matter what league you're in, you were guaranteed a legendary if your clan got first place, as well as still a decent chance for other people in lower placements to still get one. 2021 offered magic items, which is perhaps the most devastating devaluation of all. The Book of Legendaries and Book of Books allowed Clash Royale holders to use these to obtain 20 legendaries just by getting one of these books. They later would be available for 2,500 gems, allowing for each legendary to be obtained for 125 gems apiece if used to obtain 20 legendaries. The Royal Wild chest was also added to the chest cycle, guaranteeing another legendary for players who obtained it. Despite giving more than just a legendary, these chests were actually more common than the legendary chest itself. Over this long lifespan of the legendary chest all the way from 2016, it was just never updated to compete with the easier methods of getting legendaries. The Royal Wild chest would also be offered for free as long as you got enough crowns each season to every player, which meant that now every player could get 2 free legendaries every single month. Also in 2021,
legendary cards will now drop from chests more frequently.
As if it needed it already. 2022 offered masteries, and although now you needed an additional 6 legendaries to max each card, going from 36 to 42 thanks to level 14, they now had individual quests, which if completed would give the player 4 additional legendary cards per card. Also over this 4-year time span, 2 more legendaries were added, as well as 3 more arenas. This brought the number of legendaries up to 18, and the arenas up to 15. Not only was the number of legendaries highly proportional with the other rarities, but there were so many chests that guaranteed them that all players could easily obtain. There is still a grind to be had to max out legendaries, but all the thrill of wondering when you'll get a legendary was all gone. This devaluation of legendaries was not something that happened overnight. As time went on, the value of legendaries slowly declined. Nowadays, if you're a skilled player, it's easy to farm gems with masteries and use those gems in global tournaments to unlock tons of rewards to farm legendaries. Or pay a couple of bucks a month and use a Book of Books to earn 20 for just $5, which comes out to just 25 cents a legendary. Remember, the cheapest way to farm legendaries in 2016 cost over $200 each. From hundreds of dollars to mere cents, the value of legendaries is at a low point and continues to trend lower with every new update. This video may come off as a criticism to Supercell, and in some ways it certainly is, but in many other ways, Supercell was just trying to make progress easier and not make the game incredibly pay-to-win based, and we as a community should appreciate that. If there were 18 legendaries in the game today with the same scarcity of legendaries as in 2016, as well as level 6 legendaries, it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars just to compete, and the grind would be impossible for even those who spend hundreds of dollars. It is still a shame that the legendary rarity doesn't feel that special anymore, so even when you get one from something such as the crown chest, it just doesn't feel the same anymore. There was one major thing I did gloss over though. Champions were of course a new rarity added in late 2021 that would be a rarer rarity than legendaries. Although this did devalue legendaries even further in the sense of they weren't the rarest rarity anymore, it seems like Supercell is currently trying to make champions feel like how legendaries were in 2016 because they are actually extremely hard to obtain and they can't even be bought with gold. Except they actually are guaranteed from the Royal Wild chest, which appears at least once a month for active players, as well as being compatible with the Book of Books. So you couldn't argue that it's as bad as it was as trying to get a legendary in 2016. However, there are no specific magic items for champions or trade tokens, and every champion truly has a special ability that makes them feeling deserving of their champion status, unlike some legendaries. But in a way, I feel like it's a great middle ground, just as long as they don't add too many champions. But let me know how you feel about legendaries. Is it good that they're widely available to players for easier progression, or should their frequency be rare to make them feel special to get? Personally, I'm a bit on the fence on this one, but I do really miss how rare they used to be. Hopefully this video answers some questions you may have had, because you may not have even noticed how much they've been devalued because of how long it took to get to this point. Thank you guys so much for the recent support. This channel is almost at 10,000 subscribers and I couldn't be happier. If you're not subscribed, I would recommend it as I have a historical analysis video of the Executioner coming very soon.